Hi, I'm Andrew Spieler,
And I'm Mary Hope Rennie.
and you're watching or listening to Behind the Sign, real stories from real estate. All right, welcome back for another episode here at Behind the Sign. Joining us today is myself.
And myself.
That's right. It's another Mary Hope and Andrew special episode. So we're going to talk a little bit today about a very specific topic.
Yep.
Bidding wars.
I feel like that's almost like a curse word.
I know. I was going to say it sounds like a negative connotation,
Yeah, well,
bidding war.
and I think when we were talking about this, so many clients say, I don't want to be in a bidding war. I'm going to just.
Yep.
And so I think that's why we started to have this conversation. Like, it's this looming word, bidding war words, that can mean so many different things. Yet we wanted to kind of, just like everything else, peel away the onion and say,
Right.
and dispel the myths, or also how we can use that for our advantage. Buyers and sellers, agents, this podcast is for everybody. So kind of like what my observation is, since we do work with 400 agents in this office, and I also was an agent right in the market, and we can talk about the history of the last few years in the market, but kind of what we're seeing,
Yeah.
and what it means to buyers, sellers, and agents.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's start with the most generic of questions. What is a bidding war?
Ooh. I would say when people say we're in a bidding war, that just means that there's more than one offer on a property.
Okay. Right.
That's as generic as you get.
Right. So house goes up for sale, multiple offers come in.
And
and
that's
that's the beginning of a bidding war in theory, right? And which is interesting, right? Because in theory, that's kind of like what you want to have happen with every home.
And I don't think actually agents use the word bidding war much.
Right. Yeah.
It's really the general public.
Yeah.
The scary looming bidding war. This market's crazy. We're in bidding wars.
Right. Yeah.
In almost anything where you have a commodity that people are buying for a negotiable price, you would kind of assume that there would be more than one offer on the table.
Right.
So
how eBay works.
absolutely. Right. Or if someone's selling a business, they're not just waiting for one person to put an offer in and just go with that.
Right. Yep.
So I think what I believe people, when they're saying bidding war, which usually has a bad connotation, unless if you're a seller and you want a bidding war, that you're going to pay way more than what a property is worth.
Okay, sure. Yeah, you're afraid that you're going to go above and beyond what the actual value of the home or any item really would be,
which is
right?
a whole different tangent we could go on. But yes, so in the eyes of a buyer, I believe the mentality is, if we're in a bidding war, I'm going to pay too much for it.
Right.
A seller, on the other hand, if there's a bidding war, we're going to make way more than this house is worth, and we're going to cash in. It's going to be a cash cow.
Right. Yep.
So that's the connotation. I don't even know if there's, is there a definition of bidding war?
I was just looking it out. I was just interested.
We should have done that from the beginning.
It says a bidding war in real estate refers to a situation where multiple buyers compete to purchase the same property, often by offering increasingly higher prices or more favorable terms to outbid one another.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right? So,
and I don't see that as a bad thing.
Right. I mean, I think it's honestly just really more par for the course and part of the process.
Right.
Right. So, okay. So, let's talk a little bit about why has maybe the term or the sense of it been more common, at least in our market, in the last few years?
So let's kind of go back almost 5 years, I would say. Even 6 or 7, we were starting to see a decrease in inventory for a lot of reasons. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that. That's kind of a whole other thing, and Bill would be the one to do the full analysis of the market. So we were in houses were in high demand. There was not tons of inventory. It's all relative, just so you know.
Yeah.
What was low inventory then is not what low inventory is now. And then we had COVID.
Yeah.
We honestly felt like everyone was going to stop buying. However, with the combination of a lot of things, and like I said, I am not the analyst here, interest rates dropped.
Yeah.
They were getting lower. interest rates dropped, and the world continued going on, and we were like, "Oh, great."
Mm-hmm.
Um, interest rates went below 3%. That's almost I used to say, "This is free money."
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
really, you can't get a loan at 3% for anything. We've never seen that before. And so we had a little bit lower inventory.
Yeah.
You compound that that the interest rates went lower, a lot of other elements,
Yeah.
there were
Man,
incentives.
everybody wanted to be in a new house with COVID because
They had more
we
money.
were going to be working from home, right? So,
Correct.
yeah.
Oh yeah, we could just go on and on. That would be a whole nother
Yeah.
what changed in COVID. So now there's more people looking at, so if you have more buyers,
Mm-hmm.
then there are listings.
Yep.
In essence, you will have bidding wars
Mm-hmm.
if two people or more want the same house.
Right.
So that it increased a lot during that time. I was an agent during that time. I didn't have a team, I don't believe at that time. So it
Mm-hmm.
was just myself and my assistant. I remember sitting outside for an hour waiting to get into a property
Wow.
with 25 to 30 to 50. I mean, there were open houses that we would have 50 to 80 people at the open house.
That's nuts.
Okay, so that's crazy.
Right.
Um, and at that time, money was so cheap that if you offered ten to $20,000, your your monthly payment didn't change much.
Mm-hmm.
But 10 to 20,000 for a seller is 10 to $20,000 in pocket.
Right.
You see how that
Yeah.
um and so I remember advising buyers like, okay, is this worth $100 more a month to you
Right.
to go 10,000, 20,000 over?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely,
Right.
because money is cheap. And there was, of course, it's the science of real estate and everything bidding. You also don't know when the interest rates are going to go up. So everybody panicked.
Right.
And I remember writing 15 to 20 offers on properties for buyers.
Mm-hmm.
That's no fun
Yeah.
because they're just getting discouraged. Even if they are getting a great price, that's 15 times they're told no.
Right.
So that's the bad connotation. On the other end, when I had listings, people are like, that's amazing.
Right.
And it wasn't that amazing because if you have two buyers or 15, there's only so much that this is going to go up.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to appraise. We can go over all that stuff. So what happened is buyers started having to up their game higher and higher and higher. So not only was their price going up, now when we're hearing bidding wars, it's not price always,
Yeah.
it's waiving inspections,
Right.
covering appraisal gap, being creative with financing, getting cash offers,
Mm-hmm.
willing to do crazy things.
Well, so let's hold on that because I
Okay.
had a specific question as
Oh,
to
good. Okay.
that side of things.
Does that
So
answer why there's
yeah.
that bad
Yeah,
connotation?
I think, because it's getting back to like why it's more prevalent in the market now, right?
Right.
Yes, is there it's just high demand and low inventory, right? And it's been that
That
way for a while now.
Gosh, you said that
Yeah.
in one sentence, and I went on and rambled for
No,
5 minutes.
no, but that's the inner workings of why it is that way, which is an important thing to sort of note. Now, and what you were just starting to say, right, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing, right, to have a bidding war? And how can it help or how can it hurt, right? Because in on its face, you go like, "Ooh, great, multiple offers. What could go wrong?" But I'm sure you could give me an example or a scenario or two where you had multiple offers, you chose one, and then
Absolutely.
you know what? The other ones went away, or the other one didn't match the way you did, and so
Well,
something.
I remember advising. I mean, we had so many offers that we would put them on charts.
Mhm.
We have a whole multiple offer chart that we'd provide for our sellers with their name, the price. We're talking what kind of financing, how much they're putting down, which s- in a regular market, the probability of one type of financing falling through versus the other, it's not a huge difference. If they're solid buyers, it's probably going to go through.
Right.
But when you're seeing all of, if you have 10 to 15,
Have to
you
consider.
do,
Right.
and you're giving up the others. So
Mhm.
it's and there's also only a certain price that
Yeah.
it's going to go to.
I mean, I've seen some agents, I mean, they have a spreadsheet for like 30 offers that came in. The same thing. It's like every column, denotes, what the offer
And
is
what they're really
down and.
they're giving their firstborn child and letting them stay in for months afterward. Like
Yeah.
there's just um So what could go wrong on the seller's end is the same thing that could go wrong if you had one offer.
Mm.
It can fall through.
Mhm.
As an agent representing a seller, I was always looking, what is the strongest, least risk offer? That's not the right word, but you know what I mean.
Right.
Has the least risk involved.
Mhm.
And that didn't necessarily mean the highest price.
Right.
So there we had to become negotiators in that way,
Yeah.
and advising our sellers on the risk.
Mhm.
So there could be an offer that was way higher, but
But
it does
financing was
but financing would fall through because it could never appraise,
right.
and they didn't have any appraisal gap, and so
Yeah.
you'd rather go with a cash offer. So
Mhm.
this is what had happened is cash offers have no financing risk
Right.
because they're giving that up,
Mhm.
and if there's no inspection,
Mhm.
there's not much that can go wrong,
Yep.
and yet we see it's so that's why, unfortunately, what happened is buyers freaked out that they would never get anything accepted unless they were cash, gave up all rights and inspections and stuff. And that wasn't even true in that crazy market.
Mhm.
We had inspections,
Yeah.
just not as many, or we would tweak them.
Mhm.
And you just had to really work hard at doing it. So,
Yep. Yep.
yeah.
No, that makes sense. So, um, I guess what are some what are some ways, right, in
Hmm.
which and we're starting to touch on this, that you can ensure success when you know you're in a multiple offer situation to a home that you want as a buyer, right?
Yeah.
So, um, I know there's an escalation clause,
Yeah.
right? Which is something we can talk a little about. You talked about time, right? Being able to be flexible on when to move in versus when the seller needs to either find a home or, move out. So what are some of those strategies that when you're putting an offer together, if you're looking at?
That's a good question. And it kind of goes back to watching the market really carefully because that can change every offer in every market and
Mm.
what type of home you're asking for and all of that. So you really need as a buyer, you need to have a lot of conversations with your agent
Mhm.
and rely on your agent's experience and observation and reading of the market.
Yeah.
So, first and foremost, the way to win an offer in a bidding war is to know what the seller wants and
Mhm.
get as close to that as possible.
Yep.
That's really,
Mhm.
um, like I said, numbers could be it,
Mhm.
contingencies could be it, timing could be it. So you want to figure out what is important to the seller
Mhm.
and then tweak. And that could mean just being flexible on when they move out.
Right.
Um, so price, of course, and there's escalation clause, as you mentioned.
Mhm.
That's a whole conversation that some agents love it,
Mm.
some agents hate it.
Mhm.
Um, in essence, what an escalation clause says, we're willing to buy this house, but we're also willing to pay X amount over the highest offer up to X.
Right.
So, for example, if you had a $500,000 home
Mm.
listed, you're willing to pay 5,000 or 10,000 over the highest offer up to 550.
Mhm. Right.
I always, on that end, which I think made it really simple, I always ask my buyer because also you have to remember going back, what is a house worth?
Mhm.
And that's why people are scared of these bidding wars.
Right.
A house is worth what a seller is willing to sell it for and a buyer is willing to buy it for.
Right. Exactly.
End of story. There is not, people always came to me and said, what is my house worth?
Mhm.
There's not a number. Zillow has a number there,
Sure. Yeah.
and that's a zestimate.
Yes.
It should be even say that willow word. No. However, that's if even if you looked and depending solely on that non um non-trained agent estimate,
Yeah.
it changes by the day if
Oh,
you watched it
yeah, it does. Yeah.
because it's taking data of what has sold and bought and sold in the last bit.
Mhm.
However, it can't take into consideration the way the house feels when you walk in.
Right. Yeah. Like the value of a home beyond its just sort of price tag value is sort of
Square footage and
right. Hmm.
They don't know if the house next to it
Hmm.
is an eyesore.
Right. Or has a crazy layout on the inside that's like,
It just doesn't feel right.
mm,
When you walk in a house, you know if it's been well cared for or not. You
mm,
can't figure that out on pictures. So there's always a line where the sellers are willing to sell it for and not sell it for,
yeah.
and a line where buyers are willing to buy it for or not buy it for, and that's what the home is worth.
Right.
So, so that's where you have to decide as a buyer, what is this house worth to me?
Mhm.
And I used to always, and I still advise people, at what price would you be sad if you lost this house?
Sure. Yep.
So what is that price if, let's say, the house was worth 500, hey, list it, not worth. If
Hmm.
it was listed for 500
Right.
and if you offered 525
Hmm.
and the house sold for 530,
Hmm. Right.
would you be mad if it's, that's what I would tell my buyers.
Right.
Would you be mad if it sold for 530? Like, would you have been willing to pay that? And a lot of times they're like, "Oh yeah, I can't believe."
Well, and that's also because they're infusing that decision and motivation beyond just the home. It's also like, well, this is the town we've been trying to get into for
Yeah.
years, or we know we have a new job starting like tomorrow.
Or our
So,
kids have to go
no,
into the school district.
right. So there are different things that would
They're
cause them to
worth.
pay, above asking price because it will solve other problems
Yeah.
for them on a personal level.
Something's $5,000 over a 30-year loan for a buyer. That's why I think we got into this.
Hmm.
Um, was that 5,000 over 30 years doesn't have the biggest impact, but for a seller it does because they're literally getting a check for $5,000 more on the
Right.
other end.
Right.
So
Well, that's maybe.
so that's escalation. The contingencies in an offer, the normal contingencies would be financing.
Hmm.
So how you help that one with a bidding war, stronger financing, more down.
Yeah.
Um, and there's tweaks of that, having your lender talk to the agent. There's all these things. Also making it a tighter financing time, covering appraisal gaps if the appraisal doesn't come in at the
Hmm.
much at
What
time.
now? You when you started with this, you said that it's finding what the seller wants and trying to get as close to that as possible. So, other than the price that's put out there,
Yeah.
right? How do you go about finding out what other variables are important to the seller, right? So that's agent to agent
Hi,
conversation, right?
agent who's
Mhm.
listing 123 Main Street,
Yeah.
having a conversation with that agent. I know that's so funny because we don't do that anymore.
Uh-huh.
Speaker, AirPods. Um, and we haven't had to have those conversations as much
Mhm.
because it's been so fast and quick. And they said, whatever, just put the highest and best. Now we can slow down a little bit and finding out and saying, what is important to your seller? What's their timeline?
Yeah.
Because we kind of assume a faster timeline is better. But what if they can't get their other home for
Right.
8 weeks? Are you willing to wait? Or
Mhm.
do they need to find another house on the other end? So allowing them to have a home sale, a contingency to find suitable housing.
Right.
There's all these things.
Mm. Now, in some of that information that you're having in the conversation agent to agent, right? If I'm the agent representing the seller, I got to make sure the seller has given me
Oh,
approval
absolutely.
to speak to some of these more personal sort of,
Absolutely.
interests and stuff, right?
Well,
So, because have
absolutely.
it, then you can't mine it. And that's why sometimes people say highest and best because the seller is,
Yeah.
directed them to say, can't say anything, right?
And,
But,
and
yeah.
we have a fiduciary and responsibility to represent our sellers or whichever client to the best ability. They are hiring us to be the professional. So that means we need to guide our clients on what is best for them too.
Hmm. Right.
They're ultimately the deciding factor.
Yeah.
But I need to explain to my seller, this is going to be helpful. What is important to you? Are you okay with me sharing this? Because
Because it will
we're,
give you opportunity in the discussion part of
yeah.
the process, right?
And what is important? A house is not just a financial commodity.
Hmm. Right.
It is the place where you're living. It's also for a seller, the memories you brought in. It's an emotional. We've talked about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Half, more than half, I think, is emotional, even though it's your biggest
100%.
investment. So, I think those relationships with agents become so important
Yeah.
in a bidding war. I think we sometimes feel like it's a competition, and it shouldn't be.
Hmm.
And that's why it's so important to have an agent that has relationships with other agents that has a good relationship that people, I know when I see the names of some agents on there, I'm like, yes, I know we can work really well together because
Mhm.
their way of doing business
Mhm.
isn't like, I'm gonna beat you.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why I think this word bidding wars feels like,
Right. It's got the word war in it. Literally, it's going to be fighting over something as opposed to sort of negotiating over multiple different potential offers. Right.
absolutely.
And I mean, I think I said it before, but I had an agent tell me once that he said something to the effect of 9 times out of 10, if a deal doesn't go through, it's because the agents don't get along, right?
Mm.
Which it all kind of boils back to everything we're talking about, which is everything is relationship based. And it's not just relationship between agent and client or agent and vendor, it's agent to agent. And
Absolutely.
how important it is to be professional to one another because yeah, this week you might have the upper hand and leverage because you're on the sales side. You've got multiple offers. Next week, you're going to be submitting an offer to the agent who submitted an offer to you, right? So it's so important to keep that in perspective because if you
It
don't, it's
changes
just going to
everything.
make the process harder ultimately for the clients, right? So at the end of the day, it's the client who's losing out more so than the agents if
Yeah.
they're not,
But
being adversarial.
from a selfish perspective for agents,
Hmm.
your business will grow if you treat other agents right.
Exactly.
End
Yeah.
of story.
Yeah. Right.
I know that
Hmm.
from so much experience. And um, from my experience, I know that I've won deals because of my relationship with those
Right.
agents. And it's not like, ooh, they chose me over another. They just knew that we could work together.
Hmm.
And if you are not picking up that phone
Right.
and talking to that agent and building a relationship, even if you don't know them, just saying, hey, this is me, this is how I do things,
Yep.
you're not going to have the upper
Well,
hand.
because I mean, all the things you listed earlier, right? About like, okay, what offer is coming with the least amount of risk? I would assume probably one of the biggest risk factors is the agent representing the offer, right? So if you
That's it.
know that you can't trust the agent, right? This comes back to trust is more important than talent. Might be the best, most talented agent as far as pricing and
Yep.
marketing, whatever goes. But if other people can't trust you, it doesn't matter, right? Because you can't get to the core of how to get a deal done.
Yes. Well, and that also goes to who's the lender on that side too.
Right.
Um, when I'm presenting an offer, I want them to understand that my lender I've worked many times with. A lot of times I'll say, "This is a really good lender. I actually have my mortgage with this lender."
Mm-hmm.
You know how far that goes?
Oh yeah.
If I'm willing to have my mortgage with that lender,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, my clients trust me, but that agent knows to I was
It's an
willing to
extension of
right.
trust. Yeah.
So, building those people when we've had so many conversations about building those people around us,
Mhm.
um, having a title company that has a good reputation,
Yeah.
having a lender that has a good reputation,
Mhm.
having an agent that has a good reputation, not just 5 stars or whatever,
Right.
but
Right.
in the real estate world makes all the difference
Mhm.
in a bidding war. And, you know, going back to I don't wanna be in a bidding war, and, there always is the potential for a bidding war,
Mm.
and I don't think we're getting out of bidding wars.
So my last question here, and this feeds into this really well, right? Is what are some of the things that could trigger sort of a bidding war, and
Mhm.
specifically the pricing of a home? Is that often maybe the biggest factor that sort of induces multiple offer situations and bidding wars?
So, that question very much goes into where the market is right now.
Yep.
This week, it's different than last week, different than last week, was different than last week.
Mhm.
Um, for a few years, though, 90% of offers had multiple offers. It was just given because it was the combination, like I talked about, low inventory
Yeah.
and low interest rates. So people were putting offers on everything. What I'm seeing, and I'm going to talk about a few numbers in a second. I'm seeing, first of all, I don't think the buyer pool has gotten any smaller.
Mhm.
The listings have gone up a bit.
Yeah.
Actually, they have significantly in perspective,
Mhm. Right.
meaning we were below 1,000 listings in all of New Hampshire,
Wow.
like in 21. I think that's when it was.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what the number is right now, um, but it's probably double,
Yeah.
if not more. And we still do not have enough homes for buyers. We call that how many months of inventory and absorption rate.
Mhm.
So I'll give you an example. So we have shifted.
Yeah.
It's not insane. And you said what would trigger it? There's a combination: low inventory, pricing, yes. And that's kind of a deeper question. And then what type of home it is.
Right.
So so there might be 1,000 buyers and 1,000 houses, but 700 of those could be looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath colonial,
Mm-hmm.
and then 200 might be looking like at a 2-bedroom ranch.
Mm-hmm.
But there's 300 ranches
Mm-hmm.
and 100 colonials. Do you see what that's
Yeah.
where it happens? So,
Yeah.
so what we do, it's all about numbers, and I get fascinated by this. But do you mind if I share a
Yeah.
few
Yeah.
things?
Sure.
So, even though the inventory has gone significantly over, I'm going to just use Manchester because it's a big town.
Yeah.
Um, what we look at, and I like to look at single family homes because that's kind of like the norm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there is right now, or sorry, last month, if we sold all the homes and didn't put anything else on the market,
Yeah.
how many months would it take to sell those?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Like if we didn't put a single another home on the market starting tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
how long would it take to use up all those houses?
Right. Deplete the inventory.
Deplete. And knowing that a 6-month inventory is a balanced market, buyer and seller market.
Mm-hmm.
We have 1.8 months supply.
So less than 2 months of supply.
So we're seeing a shift, a slip.
Mhm.
Things aren't as crazy.
Mm-hmm. But
Yet
hmm,
6 months of supply is an even market, and we're at 1.8.
right.
Some markets
Mm-hmm.
are 1.2, 0.9, depending on what type. Remember I said the different types of homes? Um, but that's the average. It's about a 2-month supply. I think we might be a little over 2 months once the numbers come out for April.
Yep.
Um,
Spring market.
the spring market, well, not even the spring market. What we've seen, I study our office's numbers very closely. I'm a little crazy. Um, what we have seen, and I know we're outpacing the regular market, but I'm seeing it in everything. Every single month, January, February, March, and April, we listed more homes that month
Yeah.
than that month in 2024.
Okay.
Every single month for the last 4 months,
Mm-hmm.
we have listed more homes than that time last year. That tells me we have more inventory,
Right. Yep. Comparatively. Yeah.
but we also could have more buyers.
Right.
Do you see how that works?
Yeah.
Um, so with that being said, I don't think we're out of bidding wars.
Yeah.
Yet what I am seeing is, and this goes back to your pricing, what causes it. Sellers have been in such a high seller's market for so long,
Mm-hmm.
and the prices have gone up and up and up and up.
And the interest rates have also come back up.
Yeah, they've come up and calmed down a little bit.
Right.
We've been in this interest rate for over a year, so
Yep.
we're not. We thought that was the reason why people slowed down.
Yeah.
They're not going to 3%. They never will.
Right.
Don't wait till they go to 3%.
Yeah.
Don't wait till the market crashes.
Yeah.
I just proved that this market's not crashing.
Right.
We only have 1.8 months of supply in Manchester
Mm-hmm.
for all our buyers. So, what I think we're seeing is sellers are pricing too high
Mm-hmm.
because they're going higher. So, let's say a house was 5,
Yeah.
it sold for 525. Well, that's now a comp for the next one. So those people list at 525,
Mm-hmm.
they bid to 550.
Right.
Now that's the comp.
Right.
They list at 550. Do you see how that
Yeah.
can't
Right.
go very long? So
Yeah.
the one that sold for 550 actually was listed at 525.
Mm-hmm.
I bet if that house that listed at 550 listed at 525,
Right.
they would have multiple offers.
Mm-hmm.
But what's happening now is at the 550,
Mm-hmm.
they're not willing to get in a bidding war
Right.
because they're assuming they have to go over asking.
Right.
So nobody then puts an offer
Mm-hmm.
and the house sits.
Right.
And when a house sits more than a week, sellers panic.
Mm-hmm.
Buyers feel the house is what's wrong with the house.
Right. Yeah.
And then there's this weird thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing a lot of more price reductions.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy for that. So
Yeah.
Are we now having a crash? No,
Mm-hmm.
but we're having to not the prices aren't going down. Our prices still go up
Right.
at a slower rate.
Right.
I think
It's mitigated by the price drop.
yeah,
Right.
I think it was 21 to 22 or 22 to 23. We were going up 20 to 25% price adjustment every year.
Wow. Yeah.
I know from 2020 till now, most houses have doubled in price.
Yeah. That's
You
great.
can't do that.
Yeah.
We're going to always have it's still your best investment. You're not going to lose money
Mhm.
unless you have to sell next year. You'll
Yeah.
still probably make money.
Yeah.
You probably won't make tons or you'll even out.
Yeah.
Um, I don't see the house prices dropping. So that's the two things. I'm going to wait for the interest rate to drop to
Mhm.
3%, and I'm going to wait until prices drop.
Right.
The average home is not going to drop significantly. It's not the average home is like 475, 500, maybe it's 500 or
Mhm.
plus.
Yeah.
It's not going to go to 400.
Right. Yeah. It's not going backwards.
We have 1.8
Right.
months of inventory.
Right.
That
Mhm.
so
So
for
that just means that the growth rate of the price value is going to be slowed a little bit.
maybe 1 or 2%
Right. But it's
instead
not
of
going
20%.
right. Exactly. I was talking with an agent. They said that they were following, I think, Rockingham County and another one. They said of 90 new listings, I think 30 of them had price reductions after a week of sitting. So it's like, okay, well, so if a third now are pumping the brakes and
Yeah.
jacking prices, that just means that like the steam is kind of being let out of the engine that's been roaring for the
And
last.
and I haven't looked at this, and again, Jim in our office probably could do this for me.
Yep.
Um, if I went back to last year, if I comped that house last year
Yep.
that just had the price reduction, I bet that price reduction's closer to where the house would have been listed last year.
Sure.
Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
I think we're gonna see houses listed now, if they're priced right, they're gonna be very close to what last year was.
Yeah.
But we're going up 25,000 or at whatever
Mhm.
because this house had bidding war and therefore that jumped.
Right.
Um, I don't know. Does that make it more confusing? But I think
No, I think it leans into the direction of like clarity of the transition we're going through that is a slow moving. It's like I mean my screensaver is literally like icebergs here. And it's like watching sort of an iceberg slowly sort of melt and kind of, change its
yes,
form, right? And it's not one that like you can just sort of look at and just take a snap picture of. It's one that you got to look at historically,
absolutely. Well, and that's where
right? And that's yeah.
and buyers don't they hear the headlines and freak out about this or this, and I think that's where there's also a little uncertainty of what things are going to do right now.
Mhm.
But I would say buyers have a great opportunity right now.
Mhm.
There are more homes sitting on the market.
Yeah.
If a home sat on the market a week or two, I can tell you that that listing agent is having a conversation with their seller
Right.
about what's the next step.
Right. Mhm.
So if there are, you do have the opportunity to not be in a bidding war.
Mhm.
And you might be looking at that house saying it's not worth it. Okay, but if you're not in a bidding war,
Right. Mhm.
can I buy it at 550 but get an inspection, not have to do an appraisal waiver,
Right.
be able to do a better timing,
Yeah.
not have to be stressed out?
Mhm.
Or should I wait for that house that's at 525 that might but then it's gonna have multiple offers? You
Right.
see that?
Yeah.
So I feel like there is
Yeah.
a really good opportunity
Mhm.
that buyers have,
Yeah.
and I think sellers, if they are guided correctly with their agent, we are seeing multiple offers.
Mhm.
And you need to be willing to watch it daily and weekly, and that's if there's any time that the value of a realtor shows up,
Yeah.
we just have shown a value because we are seeing it at a higher level
Yeah.
and so many more than one buyer or one seller. They're just in their little sphere
Yeah.
of this is what 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes are selling for.
Right.
I mean, if you're looking for a $450,000 house
Mhm. Yeah.
in a a big town or whatever,
Yeah.
you're gonna probably compete.
Yeah. Yeah. It's gonna be a longer search too, right? So
Or
time
you're gonna have to give something up.
right. Yeah.
You're not gonna get everything because that's
Yep.
worth a
Now it
600,000.
goes back to the triangle of good, fast, or cheap. Pick two, right? So it all depends on time, price, and quality.
Good, fast,
And
and cheap.
pick two. You can't have all three ever. you can only choose two
That one.
permutation, so, and I, holds true on anything, but
Absolutely.
especially when you're looking at, the biggest purchase of your life. Do you want to find a house and move in quick because you've got an escalated timeline? Probably not going to be cheap, right? If you want to move in a house and have it be cheap and good, it's probably not going to be fast, right? The sales are probably going to need time. So,
And I think looking at a big picture, just one other thing is we are seeing a few more homes underwater. That sounds crazy because we've had such a high escalation.
mhm,
A price point people could say, how could anybody be underwater? I was just talking to an investor this morning. Actually, we had breakfast together. And so, yes, somebody maybe got a really good interest rate,
yeah,
but the values went up and up, that they now got home equity lines on their homes
hmm
that they'd spent,
hmm
not on their homes,
right,
for
hmm
that vacation, whatever.
yeah,
So they are maxed to the tilt.
hmm
If anything changes
right,
in their income, they won't be able to pay that because that interest rate, that home equity line was at 3% at the time down. Those are adjustable.
hmm right,
Now they're at 7 or 8. They might not be able to pay that. So there are opportunities. That's not a bad thing. We need more of that.
hmm
That's a balanced market.
right, yeah,
Don't they say like 3% of unemployment is like a perfect employment rate or something? There's something
something,
crazy, right? Like there's always, when you have a large amount,
hmm
the failure rate has to be there.
right,
O- And what happened in this market of 2021, there wasn't, it was such a non negotiable. There was nothing
hmm
in that foreclosure short sale. We just had an agent close $1 million short sale
um,
last week.
well, maybe we should talk about short sales
Oh, yeah.
next episode because that's actually something that I feel like
Ooh.
is not only relevant but also again one of these things that there's a lot of maybe misunderstandings or misconceptions about what a short sale actually is and what it
Did
entails.
do you know that I bought my home on short sale?
No,
Oh, there you
oh,
go.
so there you go.
Eight years ago. So it wasn't
Hmm
a long time ago.
right,
It
yeah,
was a 9-month process.
yeah,
That was fun.
yeah. Okay, well, so let's do that. So we'll
Oh,
talk about short sales next time.
good.
Maybe we'll have a guest for it.
Yeah, we'll see. I
We'll
have
see.
a few people that we could
Okay,
bring
yeah,
on. But yeah, again, anything you would like us to talk about, I think um, we know there's a lot of questions out there, but we want some ideas.
yeah.
And I'm excited. We have a few neat guests coming up, and let us know what you need.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, thank you again for watching and be sure to like, share, and follow us on YouTube. It all goes to help others find us. So we appreciate the support and reach out if you have any questions. Thanks.
See you later. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Behind the Sign, Real Stories from Real Estate.
We hope you enjoyed today's conversation and gained a little insight into the world behind those for sale signs.
Today's episode was brought to you by Keller Williams Realty Metropolitan, proudly serving New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, and Massachusetts. A special thank you to our agents, leadership, and partners at KW Metro for their continued support.
And thanks to you, our amazing listeners and viewers. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Leave us a review or comment. We love hearing your feedback, and it helps more people discover the show.
And if you have a real estate story you'd like to share or a question you want answered on a future episode, reach out to us at metro.kw.com or find us on Instagram, handle at KWMetroNH.
Until next time, we'll see you
Behind the sign.